Welcome back to the Colorado Victim Advocate Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Intervention, Inc., a Colorado-based nonprofit organization created in 1986, providing a range of services in the criminal and social justice system. Intervention provides direct offender supervision and support for those justice-involved people sentenced to probation or community corrections. In addition, we also provide pretrial monitoring, useful public service, and comprehensive victim services. For more information about our organization, or if you even want to work for us, you can visit our website at www.int-cjs.org. As you know, our podcast highlights the wonderful and necessary work of the Colorado victim advocacy community, but also with organizations that provide direct services to justice-involved clients. Our special guest today is Blake. Blake is the Outpatient Program Manager for BTS, Behavioral Treatment Services. Welcome, Blake, and thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Blake, tell me, what is BTS? Tell me a little bit about what your program is.
Yeah, definitely. So Behavioral Treatment Services, also known as BTS, is a not-for-profit that's been serving the Colorado population for 11 years now. It was actually just our birthday.
Wonderful, wonderful. Always a very important thing to have. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So 11 years of great service where we've been really striving to provide integrative, inclusive, and support other clients through the criminal justice system.
And so a lot of the programming that you do, it involves various types of programs, like I just said with Intervention. Intervention has victim services, offender supervision services, community corrections, pretrial. We have a lot of those services, but can you tell us what some of the programs that you have and just how they differ or how they work together?
Yeah, definitely. One thing about BTS is that we definitely are able to identify the needs for our clients. And so we have different types of programming throughout the state. So one of our biggest sections is going to be our residential treatment. So we are typically housed in community correction locations such as ICCS. We're housed in currently Adams, Weld, and Jefferson counties, community corrections locations where we're able to serve their residential dual diagnosis treatment programming. We also do offer traditional mental health substance use treatment in there, which is great because we're conveniently located where our clients are actually at. In addition to that, we have a 21-day intensive residential program, I would say. It's our STIRT programming, which is going to be strategic, individualized treatment for clients that are maybe not being as successful on probation as they're hoping for and looking for that initial stabilization. The initial programming is actually 21 days, but the program actually lasts about 9 months. And so we do connect them with aftercare through either one of our outpatient offices or helping coordinate care between one of the agencies that they were attending prior hand. And then in addition to those, also, we have outpatient services in Golden for our Jefferson County folks and our Boulder County also, where we help kind of assist with divert programming, alternative sentencing, and just other court-mandated treatment requirements that our clients might have.
And so obviously, you do have a lot of different programming with your agency, and it sounds really wonderful with regards to all of those programs tied together. But can you talk about, what type of clients do you see with regards to those programming? Because, when people think of mental health services, they only think of people, who might be in trauma or people who might be, in some type of intensive mental health program. Can you just talk about the type of services or the clients that you see with your services?
Yeah, definitely. We get a wide array of people that can come and benefit from services with BTS. I think a huge portion of our clients are directly referred to us by the criminal justice system for some substance use symptoms or mental health symptoms that we're seeing that may be leading to their criminal justice involvement. In our outpatient facilities, we also might get traditional outpatient services where people are coming to look for mental health support surrounding symptoms of depression or anxiety, or maybe they're kind of initially struggling with some substance use, but maybe haven't actually intersected between the criminal justice system and where they're getting referred directly to us. Our levels of treatment definitely vary, I think, depending on which program you're looking at. With our residential dual diagnosis treatment, we're looking at more of like an intensive outpatient, which is that higher level of care compared to if you're a client coming to our outpatient in Golden or Boulder, you might be looking at a group, which might be 2 hours a week or an individual session. So kind of a wide spectrum depending on what the client's needs are and what they're ultimately getting referred to us for.
And a lot of those folks, I take it based on what you just said, it sounds like a lot of those folks are just as involved folks. And do the referrals from the programs that you have, do those come directly from the courts?
Yeah, sometimes it kind of depends. I think ultimately when we're looking at I'm going to speak about our inmate outmate
Sure,
program
that'd be
from the
great.
Golden outpatient. Those clients are actually sentenced to this jail-based alternative sentencing program. Then we get referred our clients through Intervention Incorporated as we are partnering with them to serve that program for our clients. On the other end, though, I have a lot of self-referred clients that come and find us on the web, or they're maybe referred from a probation officer, but they have their choices where they can look on the Colorado State's ownpath.co to look for treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look in our residential facility, oftentimes they might be sentenced to community corrections, and RDDT, as that residential dual diagnosis treatment programming, might be a condition of their placement there.
So a lot of the work that we have done, in victim services has generally surrounded domestic violence and sexual violence offender clients. And so I know we don't have a lot of work with those folks. However, in speaking to some of those treatment providers, and if we could just kind of put it in the context of the work that you do, they've often said to us that, well, the client has been sentenced to domestic violence treatment, but they've also been sentenced to drug and alcohol treatment for something else that was there. They have often said to us, well, they need to be sober first in order for them to succeed at their treatment. Is something like that very similar to what you see in the work that you do with, say, for instance, a DUI client? And they may also be required to do some level of anger management or some level of other mental health treatment.
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes it kind of difficult sometimes to address the underlying issues
Mm-hmm.
if the client is actively using. I think it's part of recovery to see that there's going to be lapses and relapses. And I think it's so important to meet the client with where they're at and address the primary need first, right? The initial stabilization. How do I, address maybe their own history of trauma or issues that they maybe have been faced with that led to the behavior that we're now seeing. But if you are currently using substances or drinking alcohol, that might make it very difficult to have those conversations with the clients to increase awareness of behavioral patterns or emotional patterns that we're maybe seeing.
And in the context of the treatment that you folks do, or at least the actual type of treatment that you folks do, with regards to that, I know you have like group treatment classes, group therapy, if you want to call it that. Kind of how does that work out? I mean, how many folks are in there? And, kind of give us an idea as to, because some people may not know what that is, or they might have a very wrong idea about it. Can you just give us a little bit of an idea as to how that works out? I mean, just when people come in.
Yeah, definitely. I think group therapy can be very intimidating for somebody who
Sure.
has no clue or any
Or they've never
experience.
talked about it.
Yeah, right. And I think it can be scary because it sounds like I'm going to go in and just share my whole life story with these strangers. And I think therapy can be very wonderful for our clients. It offers peer support. The BHA regulates that we have no more than 12 people in a
Oh,
group. So
okay.
that's where it will be officially capped at. We definitely try to strive to have a little bit smaller groups so you guys can build cohesion and connection with the other peers to feel safe and rapport so that you can open up and maybe talk about what you've been through. I think group therapy is wonderful because outside of maybe getting that objective opinion from a therapist, you can maybe get similar experiences from a peer that could say, hey, like I tried it this way and it did work, or it didn't work for me this way, or I've been there
Mhm.
and I can understand where you're coming from. And it's scary to maybe talk about those things where that peer-to-peer connection, I think, is something that is crucial in recovery or just like behavior change in general.
Hmm.
And I think that's where group therapy can really be a huge step in the right direction for those people who are maybe unsure about one-on-one therapy too, because the pressure's not exactly always on you as well too.
And you just used that phrase, and I'd like to expand on it. You just said peer services. Exactly what is that?
Yeah, peer services, I think in the line of recovery is just being able to kind of have a support that's with somebody who's been there with
Oh,
you.
okay, I see.
Yeah. And so I think there's a different kind of level of peer services that you can get within treatment in general. Group therapy is a really wonderful one where you're getting peer to peer contact and somebody who is in the exact same situation, maybe of you or similar situations, but kind of going through the same path where
Mhm.
we actually do offer peer services as a therapeutic intervention for BTS, where we actually hire peer recovery coach employees who
Mhm.
have gone through a bunch of training through the state and hold a license where
Oh, okay.
they're able then to meet with our clients in a different way than like a therapist can actually show up.
So, in a situation where you have a client who might be exhibiting some signs of, not being comfortable within a group setting, I mean, how would one of your therapists or one of your interns, determine that, and kind of what would be the next course of action for somebody like that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of ways that we try to do this. And number one is really being person centered. So we will approach the client that we're maybe seeing that isn't as comfortable in group therapy, or maybe they're needing more one-on-one care, where we'll just have a conversation with them of like, hey, what's going on? How can we best support you with your needs? Our role here is to help you make these behavior changes or, build confidence or whatever the presenting reason for treatment is. Oftentimes in that kind of situation, we'll start having a back and forth with the client on what their needs are. Are they interested in one-on-one, and just kind of debriefing them on what one-on-one therapy would actually look like. Another way that we might see that is a client might be struggling, not actively engaging in treatment, and we're seeing some of their problem behaviors maybe show up. So positive UAs, not compliance on probation, where we oftentimes will have an interdisciplinary staffing team where we'll just kind of raise our concerns with other parties that are involved in that client's care. Oftentimes then we're able to get a game plan and kind of maybe increase level of care with the support of the case managers so that we could best kind of see the outcome that we're all hoping for, which is ultimately that client succeeding. So then we would just be approaching that client and mentioning, hey, we had a conversation with your case manager, PO, parole officer, and we think it would be most supportive if you're in individuals, maybe in addition to those group therapy too, to best kind of support your treatment plan goals and overall the objective of treatment.
And so, in that context, I mean, somebody who's first coming to a treatment class and they don't know anything about it. I mean, how long does something like that last? A group therapy session?
Yeah, I think it really depends on treatment that they are enrolling. Most of our DUI offenders that we get for the inmate outmate program are typically track D, which is looking at about 13 months in total of treatment. So
Mhm.
3 months for typically education, which is a 12-week, 2-hour per week group session where you're learning the fundamentals of alcohol and the impacts on the body, and then transitioning into more of the therapeutic section of that, which would be the track therapy, which is about 10 and a half months. So it
Mm.
could be pretty lengthy times. Other times we will get referrals from probation or the case manager where a client needs maybe 3 months of a mindfulness-based relapse prevention, where then they're exposed to these skills, and then maybe we're assessing to see if individuals are necessary at that time to really see the implication of those skills that they learned in the group therapy.
And so, looking at that, obviously, the work that you do is very important, and you obviously would be looking for a certain type of candidate who might want to be coming to you to either work on your staff specifically or as an intern. Can you just tell us what kind of a candidate are you looking for? Because some folks, they're in, school to become a therapist. And let's say, for instance, they're just coming out fresh. But, what type of person are you looking for as a candidate if you receive a resume or an interview for somebody?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the biggest thing for me as a hiring manager is looking for somebody with flexibility and understanding of what the criminal justice system ultimately is. I know, especially if you're an intern and trying to get into this field, it could be a little intimidating to see this larger system, right, as the criminal justice system.
Absolutely, yes. We have that happen in field services a lot too, or in community corrections. People are just coming to us right out of college or something, and they're going to be working with offender clients.
Yeah, and so I think oftentimes too, some big skills that we're looking for is evidence-based knowledge. So knowing about CBT, DBT, MI skills, that is motivational interviewing, that are most supportive for our clients, that we've actually have research that shows behavior change that we're looking
Hmm.
for. I think especially too some understanding that our clients might not be ready to be where they're at currently. Court-mandated treatment can be difficult for some clients to gain motivation and awareness of the need of change. And so somebody who's able to meet the client with where they're at and best kind of support them along their journey rather than having their own agenda as well too.
And so in line with that, so let's say, for instance, somebody finishes up school, they're looking to become a therapist. I'm sure there's some level of state mandated services in order to receive a license to do that. I mean, what is the process for that to become a licensed therapist?
Yeah, definitely. So after attending your master's program, whether in counseling or psychology or social working, you will complete a practicum and internship. There is a minimum required hours, typically anywhere from 500 to 700 hours
Hmm.
required to be completed during those time periods where you'll have direct client contact, indirect client contact, and then supervision to ultimately develop those skills that I was mentioning earlier. After that, then you must take your Colorado jurisprudence exam, which basically just highlights the statutes of ethical practice,
Oh,
what our
okay.
state
Hmm.
requires us to do. And then, in addition to that jurisprudence exam, you will need to register with DORA, which is the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and basically get your candidacy license. So, either an LPCC, SWC, or something along those lines where you would then be a candidate for those like full on licensed.
Oh, okay. And so in looking at that, obviously in any program that's a nonprofit like yours, and of course, people sometimes don't understand what that is, but most nonprofit agencies, unless they actually sell a product of some kind, they're pretty much reliant on grant funding, foundational support, direct donations, or direct fees for the services provided. I know that programs, like yours are always looking to expand to help other people. And I know that, Colorado Gives Foundation, they've always had a campaign, to help programming like yours. I mean, how can people donate to BTS if they want to, say, hey, this is a really great program. I'd like to, donate to it.
Yeah, definitely. We are always looking for funders as we do a client scholarship, which ultimately helps our clients basically with any cost of treatment. Ways that an individual can donate is either emailing our info email, which is info@btxs.org, or going to our website, btxs.org, where we have a Get Involved tab where you're able to kind of search through, read about our mission, and be able to kind of make a donation. Or ultimately, every year when we campaign with the Colorado Gives Foundation, being able to make a donation through that.
So you can go donate pretty much at any time. You don't just have to wait for the campaign for Colorado Gives.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And so, in kind of looking at that, I mean, just the whole scope of mental health treatment. I mean, what would you say to an individual or, a family member who's hesitant to seek treatment for a mental health issues? I mean, what would you say to somebody like that as to seeking out a program like yours? Because obviously there's a lot of still unfortunate stigma to it, but we know that mental health counseling works. And what would you say to somebody like that, that's hesitant to come to a program?
Yeah, definitely. I think normalizing the hesitancy that comes up and knowing that changes can be scary, right? I think that's a huge piece of how I try to approach clients and get them to lack of a better words, buy into treatment in order to see the change that they're hoping to see, right? I think if a person is unsure or maybe uncertain about the next steps that they should take, I would always encourage somebody to do some research about maybe what the outcome that they're hoping for, but also really just maybe envisioning the way that their life could be different if they were able to see a different perspective or build different kind of skills to see the outcome that they're hoping for. I think a lot of times we're all humans, right? We only see our life oftentimes from our own lens. And with therapy, maybe it's that place to have a different area to bounce off of, different directions, see different perspectives to maybe hopefully have a different life that you're achieving goals and working towards.
Because that's what we try to do in victim services. We try to provide the services, referrals, programming for those victims of crime that we're dealing with because, we'd like them to achieve a life free of violence. And in doing so, the work that you do, you're trying to move them from one part of their life to what could be a better part of their life. And so kind of along those lines, kind of going back towards somebody who's first sitting in for their first group treatment class. I mean, how do you see those folks, when they're first sitting there? Are they generally very reserved or do they just immediately talk? I mean, you talked about meeting them where they are. And how do you see somebody like that, first and foremost?
Yeah, I think it's pretty common to have a client come in, be a little timid and unsure about what they're diving into or maybe the agenda of the day, right? And I think naturally what I've seen over my years of practice now is that they're little clams. They start opening up as they get more exposure, more understanding. They can see how these things can be applied to their life and how they can actually benefit from these rather than somebody's telling me I have to do that. And so I think it's really wonderful to just kind of see the progression of a client over the course of treatment, especially when they're maybe told that they have to do it or unsure if they really want this for themselves. But I think, I have clients that still reach out to me 3 years later telling me how wonderful that treatment was and how they were able to really integrate it. And now they're living the life that they've really wanted to, free of interaction with the criminal justice system or having problems outcome due to behaviors that no longer serve them.
And, and kind of like, looking at it to the full spectrum of it, working in mental health can be very difficult. And do you see that as, the somewhat of an end goal to where somebody is crime-free, drug and alcohol-free, whatever type of substance it might be?
Yeah, I think the way I frame it is that I ultimately want to get the client with where they want to be, but usually it is living a productive life within society, right? Not having these negative consequences come out due to these behaviors that no longer serve me, that I may have learned when I was a child, right? Or I've picked up along the way due to trauma or environment that I was in. And I think there is just power in being able to choose how to respond to a situation rather than react based on instinct. And I think that's where my ultimate end goal is, to get somebody to feel confident in what they're doing each day and have awareness of how it might impact them or other people, because good things are going to happen and bad things are going to still happen. And so I don't think expecting to have everything be wonderful is the end goal. I think it's building the skills to be able to navigate those life challenges that are inevitably going to happen.
Great. Thank you so much, Blake. I really do appreciate, you for being here today and for the work that you and your team do. Certainly with highlighting this program that you have with Behavioral Treatment Services, BTS. Certainly, if you would like to have more additional information about BTS and the services that they provide, or if you're looking to want to work with BTS, we would ask that you go to their website at www.btxs.org. And I want to thank you, Blake, for being here today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Randy, for having me.
The Colorado Victim Advocate podcast can be found on Spotify or our YouTube channel, and we hope you join us for another episode. Working with the victim advocacy community, a victim advocate is a noun, a subject, a verb, and an adjective, and we want to thank you for listening today.